Hello, my name is Randy. I'm an addict alcoholic. I've heard some people say grateful, but I can't really say that because if I'd never known what it was like to be drunk or loaded, it would make things a whole lot easier to get through on days like today and the last few months. First, I'd like to open with the scripture which describes my situation perfectly. It's Psalms 40, verse 1 and 2. I waited patiently for the Lord to help me, and he turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the pit, out of the mud and out of the mire. He set my feet on solid ground and steadied me as I walked along. I was in a very deep pit, called out of control addict alcoholic. You may or may not be able to tell that now, but I was there. I'd like to welcome the newcomers who might be watching this, because you remind the old timers like myself what it was like. At least we ever forget, and sometimes we forget. Also, a note to the youngsters. For those under 21, I am an old man now. You made a very wise decision to come in the program when you're young. You don't have to repeat the mistakes that I made and several thousands of us have made. And you can learn from our mistakes and choose better vices and ways to survive. I'm using my notes because in about over a period of 15 years I've done about 400 hits of LSD, which I used to jokingly call Lucy Airlines, and I've grounded it back in '94, which is almost 20 years ago. If there's anything such as a living miracle, you're looking at one. For all intents and purposes, I should have been dead many years ago, or on the psych ward or in prison. By God's grace, I'm still here, and I'm sober today. I came into the program in January of 1988, and I'll get to that very shortly. Some of what I'm going to tell you or share with you, you're going to find shocking. But before you condemn me, realize you didn't have to walk into my shoes, and you didn't have to live my life. I'm 61 years old, and I feel closer to 80, and feel like I've lived several lifetimes over. It's not my intention to shock anybody, but I have not had what you call a normal lifestyle or upbringing. I am dealing with 12 medical conditions. One you can tell from the twitches. It's 6 neurological problems. There's no control in them, and there's no cure. The other is my voice with COPD from smoking cigarettes, cloves, crack cocaine, marijuana, and God knows what else. So, I found out the hard way, despite the fact I had no intention of being this old, that you will pay for your choices you make when you grow up. It is a living miracle I am still here today, because the past 2 years have been the most painful years of my life. And it is only by God's grace that I'm still here. Which brings me to 2 promises real quick before I get into the actual story. There are 12 promises. 11 says, we will intuitively know how to handle situations we used to baffle us. And the last 3 years have really been baffling to me. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we cannot do for ourselves. I can guarantee you, I am not keeping me alive or keeping me sober today because of all the pain that I'm having to deal with. And again, I'll get that later. I was raised a military kid, which meant I was constantly on the move. It was good in one way. I got to see different parts of the world. I got to see Madrid, Spain, and all over the country. But on the other hand, it makes it very hard to make long-term relationships, which I'm still dealing with today. I attended 9 different schools in 13 years. The first 21 years of my life, I was in the hospital at least once a year for pneumonia, the flu, or a major weight problem. The very first memory of my life is that of around 4 years old, I've been stuck in an oxygen tent alone and barely able to breathe. And I felt abandoned at that point, and abandonment is still an issue I have to deal with. And I realized since my mom had me at 16 years old, and she had 3 boys by the time she was 19, so it was somewhat of a kid taking care of 3 kids, and she just couldn't be there for me at all times. Like most addict alcoholics, I always felt different. I didn't feel a part of. And I guess that runs in the program. That's one reason we drink and use, because we don't feel like we belong and we're different. For myself, for years I felt like a woman stuck in a man's body. And that was a major issue until I became adults. And thankfully is no longer an issue today. While we're living in Spain, we moved there when I was 7, and then we left when I was 12. I took my first drink in New Year's Eve in '63. I was 10 years old. It was quite innocent. It was myself, my brothers, and my maid. And the sangria hit me like big time. And I thought, cool, man. I found what I needed. I wanted to feel comfortable. I go get drunk. Not realizing the consequences down the road. My first major addiction became food. Even as a youngster, I felt emotionally detached, abused, and misunderstood. So I used food as the first addiction. I was weighing 180 pounds at 12 years old. And by the time I reached 22, I was weighing 305 pounds. And it only took 2 nervous breakdowns and massive amounts of drugs for me to lose the weight, but that's no good way to lose the weight. I was in emotional and mental chaos even as a youngster. I wasn't even sure that the people who were raising me were actually my parents, and I was so unsure that I even went down and checked my birth certificate to make sure these 2 people who were raising me were actually my parents. So we didn't have that close relationship, but I realized they were both youngsters, and they were doing the best that they could do at the time. I didn't know it till later. There are consequences for our actions, and again, when you're young, you don't think about that. I had no intention of ever being over 40. I was going to live fast, die young, and get out of here. Around the age of 13, I first started having sex with anybody, male to female. I didn't care. I was the swinging 60s. And it was free love and free everything and everything out in the open. Regretfully, around the same time, 12 or 13, I was molested by a guy, for the first 3 times. And now it's like a puzzle piece. I know some of the pieces, but some of them don't. this led me to massive confusion, and the only way I could deal with it was to use glue, to sniff glue and paint. And thankfully, it was only by the grace of God that I did not get any street drugs in, or I would be dead now, I'm quite sure. I swore that I would never start using drugs, but that's down the road. At around in the year 67, it was a summer of love. I was a hippie, but I was limited to what I could do, being my dad was in the military. So most of it was in the youth center, hanging out, having fun, and dancing, and grooving to the psychedelic lights, and have a unique experience. With the paint and the glue, we just put on the incense and put on the Indian music, and just flip out and go into a trance and have a groovy time. By the age of 16, my relationship with my dad was distant at best. With me. And he went to Vietnam, and I was a war protester. I didn't approve of the war then, but that's neither here nor there. A guy came into my mom's life, and he treated me like a son, like I thought my dad should have treated me. But I honestly didn't care if he came back or not. The best thing was the family had moved the fourth time, and we were in a very small city in Arkansas. You could put the whole city in one building in any downtown, like Phoenix or LA or whatever, 5,000 people. Most of our relatives were in the area, so that was really cool. God had gotten me led to a certain church, into a vacation Bible school, and I became a Christian at 16, initially. Because I wasn't allowed to feel or have emotions or freely express them, I started writing at 16. I've now written 250 poems, 7 have been published, and in case you didn't know, I have rewritten all this in the story. It's 31 pages, covers in greater detail, and the story is available to anyone who wants a copy by email. Shortly after my dad returned, we sort of made up. At least there wasn't fighting for a year. And we went to California for the first time, and that's where I wanted to be during the 60s, but we ended there in 1971. I joined the Jesus movement, which is probably 3 of the happiest years of my life. It wasn't the traditional religious church thing, and a bunch of young people getting high, for lack of a better word, on Christ, who is my higher power. I felt, even as a youngster, that I was wanting to be a TV evangelist or a radio DJ. So I joined a Bible school, which ended up for a year and a half. And thinking back out now, it was partially because they accepted me as I was, despite my background and despite my struggles. And I felt a camaraderie, and regretfully, life has a way of throwing things at us, as most of us know. And around July of 74, things started falling apart. And on August 9th, the very day of Watergate, for those who remember, Nixon resigned. The Bible school blew up in my face, and all my hopes, my dreams, my goals, everything just went, blew up in my face. It's very hard wanting something so bad and then watch it fall in around you. to this day, I do not know how I got from Central California to LA and ended up in San Clemente. Strangely, I was right across the street from President Nixon's house within the first week after he resigned. I recall walking to the edge of this cliff overlooking the ocean, and I was in so much pain, I was seriously contemplating or wanting to jump off and ending the pain once and for all. Because I've been a Beatles fan since May of '63, and I still am. I just happened to carry my radio with me, and the Beatles song came on. And this may sound crazy, but an angel literally picked me up and threw me away from the edge of the cliff. And I went back to the Christian house I was in, and we had a good cry and discussions. It may or may not have been my first suicide attempt, but it wasn't my last, a long shot. While I was in the Bible school, I'd been molested for the third time while hitchhiking, trying to find work. And I thought I had the gay bisexual thing resolved. It had only gotten worse. I ended up having a nervous breakdown, and for the next year, I don't really remember. Somehow I ended up leaving Los Angeles and go back to my parents' house in Central California. And at that time, I was angry with God, society, myself, with everything and everybody. I didn't care if I lived or I died, or I wasn't even sure I was even alive. So I returned to the one thing I thought had never let me down, which was Jim Beam, best friend, Jack Daniels, Southern Comfort, and any other alcohol I could think of. As it was getting to the point where I was drinking almost a quart a day of straight whiskey. That's not counting how many I drank in the bar. From being an activist in the 60s, I'd gotten to this very sad, pathetic state of being a state of apathy. I just didn't care anymore. I worked for at least over 10 years drunk or loaded at work, and most people didn't even notice, as long as they did a good job. The sexual confusion that started when I was a kid only got worse, and I went into the gay lifestyle, or bisexual, I'm not even sure. I tried going to the straight bars, and the women treated me like crap, like they had when I was growing up. And my overdominant mother did not help a little bit. I would ride my bike 20 to 25 miles across town, to go to my favorite disco. And if angels earned their wings, they did with me, because of many nights I do not remember leaving the disco, where I was going, and what I was doing. I do know I was hanging out in the bathhouses, and looking back at it, I was somewhat developing a split personality, because I act totally different at the bars and the discos. And as long as I was on the disco floor getting down, I was cool. Everything else, the world disappeared, I just didn't care. I was having a great time. I was, dancing while Rome burned. I was having a good time, but at the same time, I was having major confusion over my sexual identity, and the loss of the Bible school, and the world just basically crashed in on me. I tried to come out of the closet in late 70s, and I had people nearly killing me or threatening me, and I just did not understand what was going on. I was hoping the whiskey and somewhat would kill me eventually, and it nearly did. You know you're an out-of-control alcoholic when you pass out in the disco or a bar with blasting music. Many nights were spent sleeping in the parks, or in the park bathroom, or on the park bench. I was too drunk to go home. I didn't know where home was. Once I passed out of my parents' parking lot and barely missed my dad running over me when he got up that morning. I found out later I was having DTs. I was shaking so bad it wasn't funny. I realized now it was the alcohol. I was having blackouts. And again, the only real time I felt wanted after I left Bible school and I was involved in this in the late 70s was when I was having sex with somebody, which is pretty pathetic, but that's the way it had been. I felt I had two choices at the time during most of the drinking. Either I get drunk or I'll kill myself. Getting into recovery, I found a third choice. My parents were not aware or very naive. I lied to them and told them I would be going to a friend's house and never bothered to find out where I was or when I'd be back, if I'd be back. Many a night, I did not know where I was going, and you know you're drunk. I'm on a 10-speed bike riding across the city and I fall off a bike. Because of being a falling down drunk, I'm now paying for it physically. In the age of 26, in March 79, after swearing I would never ever do drugs because I saw what I was doing to my heroes, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, and Janis Joplin, and several other superstars that I was looking up to, since rock and roll was and is one of my major things to keep me going. By March of 79, I just really didn't care. I was working at a restaurant, and with a cook, myself, and a waitress, and only got 3 people in the restaurant. The cook and I went in the back of this room, and he pulled out a bong, and I did not know what a bong was. I'd never seen weed, I knew nothing about it, other than it was addicting, and I just flatly didn't care anymore. I had gone to business school in 77 when I first moved to Phoenix, with hope that I could change careers and get out of doing restaurants, but I got lied to. Again, the world questioned on me, and which gave me another reason to be mad at God and mad at the world. At first, the weed was free, but as most addicts know who probably started this way, it's free, and then you'll pay what you have to get the drug, and do what you have to do to get the drug. Having addictive behavior, I should have known better, but I didn't listen. So within a month, it went from the free weed to I had to have it every day. And eventually led up to hashish, LSD, uppers, downers, nerve pills, painkillers. If it got me high, if it got me out of reality, I would do it. I didn't care. What I had been preaching against at the Bible school, I was going to the bars and preaching there, and going to the porno theaters and actually picketing them. I suddenly found myself with the shoes on the other feet, and doing the very same thing I was preaching against, which made me feel even worse. I had 3 cuts on my wrist, which I don't know when or how they got there, but I'm pretty sure it was a suicide attempt. And again, God saved my life. But in 1980, I was 26, 27. I had got myself together enough to stop the weed and the drugs. Thought I was ready to try for the third time to re-enter the ministry. So I flew out of San Francisco to Dallas to attend a 2-week major revival, which was great. And then I went back to Arkansas to try again. It lasted for 2 or 3 months, and then reality hit in. I'm still a sex addict, an alcoholic, and an addict that thought he thought I had it under control, but I didn't. I had met this guy, young guy. He was a distant cousin or relative, and we fell in love with each other. He was my second one, I believe. Yeah, second one. Part of it is a matter of codependency and needing to be wanted and feel like you're needed. So we felt something magical between us. And I had always had girlfriends growing up, but I just didn't know which direction to go to. By October of '80, after having a wonderful summertime and taking numerous Elvis tours and going to Graceland, I knew that where I had found the relationship was wrong, or I wasn't for sure, and I knew that my mission for going to Arkansas was to become a minister, and that was not going to happen. So I quit the job I had at the motel, and very, very reluctantly ended up back here in Phoenix. Thankfully, I had done so because December 8, 1980 was one of the worst days of my life, and how I stayed alive and stayed sober during that week, I don't know. That scumbag who killed John Lennon, it felt like a sword going through me because I had been a fan for so long, and therefore the people I looked up to, and I totally lost it. At the time, I thankfully had ended up at a job at a Mervyn's department store, which is much better than restaurants. And I was doing stocking and emptying trucks, and I was that strong back then. By April of '81, I lost it. John's death affected me big time, and the ministry falling down, losing my liver, and everything had just crashed in on me again. So I had what I call my second breakdown, and quite reluctantly had to apply for disability in April '81. It took me a year, and was on it for the next at least 15 years. I did not work anywhere for 15 years. However, the best thing about John's death was that I got out of my state of apathy and became an activist, which I still am today. It pisses people off, but that's too bad. John's death had a major impact on me. Being in such an emotional state, I met this guy. We were going to a Bible study at his parents' house, and in some way it was like we were meant to be together at first night. We were lovers for over a year, and to be honest, I was probably closer to him than my own wife now. I'm married to a female. We did practically everything together. He was at my house, or I was in his house. And regretfully, the drugs also took over. And I was having a wonderful time with him. And part of the reason for the drugs was over the confusion of my sexual identity. And another hard thing I had to do was in April '82, I do what typical addicts do. We do geographics. We can't handle something, we leave. thinking things are going to change. Regretfully, we have to go with us. At the rate I was doing the LSD and things, I was going to become a vegetable if I kept it going. I'd seen the grass grow and trees bend and fences bend and skies becoming rectangular. The sun disappeared and everything you can imagine when you're doing LSD. We almost became a couple, but I was thinking about having a sex change, but I realized it wasn't God's intention for me to do so. So in April 2, I moved to LA after swearing I wouldn't. My friend of mine from the Bible school came over after I'd gone to the Beetle Convention, and we moved to Orange County. The best thing is I met these two females, Kathy and Roberta. Kathy would become my girlfriend for 7 years, my second longest. And Roberta became like a big sister to me, who I knew for over 25 years. And regretfully, she passed away 3 years ago from breast cancer, which I'm still trying to deal with. After wanting to move to Hollywood, California, for 10 years, I got my dream fulfilled in March of '87, and I lost everything in 10 months. I started the year homeless, and I ended the year homeless for different reasons. I had the honor, privilege, or freedom to live out my hippie dream, hippie lifestyle in the 80s. 20 years later, I was living life in the fast lane, and if you live there long enough, you're going to crash and burn, and it's going to be one hell of a trip and hurt when you do crash. After trying to help this couple out in Hollywood, they somehow came in and took over my life, and I ended up running a crack house. In 4 months, my life went from somewhat serene to complete chaos. When you're doing crack, that's what happens. When I moved out in November '87, I owed the bank, stores for rent, and doctors, whatever. I just wrote checks and didn't give a damn, and I didn't pay them because drugs were more important. I had not paid the rent for 4 months, and they were going to send the cops after us. I was going to call the cops myself to try to get out of the situation, but realizing there's drugs in the apartment, so I can't do that. I moved what few things I had left into a storage room, and I can't say the 10 months in Hollywood was the best of times and the worst of times. I was living very close to Hollywood and Vine, and world famous Capitol Records, and I could see the Capitol Records building from the staircase. One day, about 6 weeks after I moved in, I was working on a project and was feeling very down, very depressed, and I went to the staircase and was contemplating jumping off the 5-story staircase, and again an angel picked me up and pulled me back in the lobby. Thankfully, I had a church there that was helping me out, and even the church pastor there said, "Move out of here now, you don't want to be here." Of course, I didn't listen. We have a bad tendency of not listening to God when He tells us to do what we need to do, because He knows best, but we always think we know best. I always thought that an addict alcoholic was that junkie on the street carrying that bag with a bottle of wine, or whatever you call it, the cheap liquor, and I could not see what was going on, but I had become an out of control addict alcoholic. And my first recovery meeting ended up being Hope Chapel, Hermosa Beach. I was in Redondo Beach with my friend Roberta. No, we didn't do anything, but we were like best of friends, and she helped me through a lot. And with her talks, I was able to finally hang around women, and eventually I got married. My first few meetings were, I was doing separate times for how many days I had off cocaine, how many days off LSD, how many days off marijuana, blah, blah, blah. I was told it was all or nothing. And I said, you gotta be kidding me, man. I always needed something to help me cope, help me keep going. It was not funny. How I ended up getting off crack was Roberta had let me live with her for a while. She had gone to go see her daughter, and I locked myself in the room for a week. And I punched and I screamed and I yelled and screamed to get off the crack and off the other drugs. It's not a way I would recommend to get clean, but that was my first experience. I was having the primal scream therapy. One of my first sponsors told me, if you think about going back out again, put some marbles in your pocket. Because then go in your pocket and reach the marbles out and say, you've lost your marbles, you go back out again. And my first fourth step was done in an AA convention. Now picture me, who's been in the gay lifestyle and not sure of their identity, with this biker dude, tough looking dude. I'm scared to death, but I did my sexual inventory with him, and he didn't attack me like I thought he would, which is surprising. Despite all this is going on, I still want to deny that I'm an addict alcoholic, and I can control this, but denial will kill you. Denial is probably one of the hardest things to deal with. I was an out-of-control addict alcoholic, and it took 6.5 months to get me off the street. I could have very well died. I went through hell and a half to finally find a place, and ended up with a Filipino family for the next 5 years. He did drink, and he also had 2 guns, but he didn't understand that I was in recovery, so that did cause a problem sometimes. Finally, after getting a new place and moving in and trying to start over, around July 4th, I'd always generally gotten drunk or loaded around the holidays and had some fantastic times. Usually went to a concert or hung out with my friends and got down and had a cool time. Well, this time I had bought 14 hits of LSD on the streets of Hollywood, which is one of my major places to buy it, or in Venice. I ended up taking 12 hits in 2 weeks, and it had to be divine intervention, because I do not know to this day how I got back, made the phone calls, or set up the hospital or anything. All I remember is going down the freeway, flying in my mind, seeing the word psychiatric and thinking, oh great, one flew with the cuckoo's nest. I've really done it now. Maybe I should have been here before. I was in the chemical dependency ward, flying on 12 hits of LSD, and there's not much you can do about that overdose. But I was having some of the worst flashbacks you can imagine. Picturing I was in an earthquake, which wasn't happening. I was 12 years old, a scared kid in a fetal position, and the walls were melting, and needless to say, I was scared to death. I spent 35 days there, and it was the start of a very interesting journey. My parents surprised me big time. Excuse me, for my 35th birthday, they drove out here from Phoenix across the hot desert to my hospital in California, and for the first time we actually cried and prayed together and hugged each other. I felt free enough that I can discuss anything. It was one of the few times we actually had open conversation without any fear of a lecture or debate or anything like that. The problem became afterwards that my parents wanted to work the program for me, and it just not work that way. Only you can work your own program. It took me 7 years to get my first year sober. Excuse me. COPD's kicking in. What I learned from the relapse is I felt shame, insecurity, doubt. Every time I slip, I'd fear, what the hell is the use? I'm an out-of-control junkie and I'm going to die this way. I did not want to admit that I was out of control, and maybe my ego got in the way, which means edging got out of the way. So it took a very long time for me to admit that I was an addict alcoholic, especially after being a minister for 2 years. At the age of 40, I got myself together enough to go to voc rehab, and they sent me to business school for 2 years. And I actually learned the office procedures and learned computers and technology, and I'm still learning to this very day. It was entering into a new world. On January 29th, 93, I graduated from the business school. I had to put up with bullies there too, like I did in high school, and I damn near came close to quitting. Somehow I got through that. A year to the day, well, almost a year to the day, on January 17th, 94, the worst earthquake hit LA. I was in Burbank at the time. Had the quake hit the day before, I probably did now, because I was with my ex-girlfriend. I was so drunk, I was seeing the porcelain god, and my head felt as big as a watermelon. I was mad at my friend who stabbed me in the back. We're now best friends, and I got him to recovery. Strangely, let me explain Burbank first. My last place in California after 12 years was with my fourth lover and my last one. He was with his ex-wife, who was with her boyfriend. Is it confusing? You're right. And he also had 3 kids. Very reluctantly, on a year to the day after the graduating from business school, I had tried to find a new job, and without experience you don't get a job, and you don't get a job without experience, so I was getting the damn runaround again. So everything I owned in my name was in the back of an SUV. I packed it up from Burbank, and I left LA, probably for good. And the last thing I wanted to do, and I did not want to end up here in Phoenix, and I'm still wondering why I'm here now, but I've survived 20 years. I felt totally dead inside, only though my heart kept beating. I could not believe that my dreams, my hopes, I was working on several projects, and it was all over with, suddenly. I did meet a few people here when in Phoenix when I first came out here. One of my friends and I went too far, and it cost us our relationship. But I just said, man, I've been doing this for so damn long, for 7 years. I've been trying to get clean and sober. I'm tired of it. August 20th, 1995 is my sobriety date. I started attending meetings more often. I finally got another sponsor, and I started working the steps and helping others on in person and online. I was also attending different schools, and slowly I was getting off disability. A month after I got truly got clean and sober, I met this lady with no intention of ever getting married. I told her flat out of my background, and she said she loved me unconditionally, and I found out it does not exist, at least not that I found out anyway. She watched me get clean and sober since 95. After going to 2 marriage encounter classes, we got married in November 97, and I'd already said marriage and funeral were the same thing, and some days I still think that, but it's another story. We had fun and were adjusting to our many differences, and it's been very confusing. Her only experience with alcoholism is her parents were alcoholics, and she only saw the bad side. To be quite honest, when I was out there drinking and using, it was some of the funnest years of my life. The best thing is, with my staying clean and sober, I was moving up in the world, actually going back to work, and on my 50th birthday, my wife and I went to a fancy resort for 3 days in Scottsdale, and I felt like the king of the world. Since I got into recovery, I've been sued by the government. I tried to get off SSI, or Social Security, and they sued me $13,000. I filed for bankruptcy. I've had over 40 jobs. I was fired from doing my job at a marketing research place on my dad's birthday, August the 3rd, 2003, excuse me. I have been off disability, and the 5.5 years at the market research was my longest job up until my last one. In between those two, I had 27 jobs. And it was a miracle from God, because here I found myself actually working for the state, the county, and for the banks, and for the state taxes. And none of that would have been possible if I'd been still drinking and using. The 12th year of my sobriety, my wife and I had 15 credit cards, and we were $115,000 in debt. Because of my being out of work, we had to pay over $2,000 a month just on credit card bills, and then use a credit card to live on, and that's a vicious circle and will get you nowhere. After having something like 30 jobs and 13 different temp agencies, God opened the door for me in a big way in April 2007, and I ended up working for a cancer association. It was a job to make a difference. It was helping to fight cancer, and that was a huge miracle because it was very rough in times, and I wanted the job so badly that I finally quit smoking after 27.5 years. But I'm still on the nicotine lozenges, which has been harder to quit than the drugs were. In my 15th year, in 2010, my wife broke her leg. She wanted to get out of doing laundry so badly that she slipped and broke her femur bone on the blanket. That's a joke. Which meant for me, well, I'd done this before with the blanket, but it was just a freak accident. Meant for me is for over 4 months, she was in the hospital and in a rehab, and then she eventually into my parents' house. I had to take over control of everything, and I was literally going mad. these two guys at work I thought were totally cool. They were both drunks and addicts. Um, they started giving me rides back home, and at midnight they come and smoke weed in front of me and be drinking in front of me, and it got extremely difficult to say no with my being so vulnerable. At that point I came very close to losing it. By God's grace I told him get lost and go away. I bailed this one guy out. I should know you never trust a junkie. I bailed this guy out for $70 with assurance he'd pay me back. The guy had the balls to drive me home, but first he went to the butcher's house and bought an ounce of weed with the money I loaned him, and I was furious, and he's damn lucky I didn't beat the crap out of him. I did cuss him out at work later on, and he gave me a death threat, and I said, I'm not scared of you. So we're no longer friends, but lesson learned, you don't trust a junkie, even in recovery probably. The hardest part, when my dad had a stroke in 2005, in March 2005, and I was working for the state, and I got a phone call to rush over to the hospital, and by this time we had made up, but I had mixed feelings. What do I do? How am I going to react? And I got to the hospital, and he didn't recognize me, or my wife, or my mom, and it scared the crap out of me. They put him on medications, and he lasted for 8 more years. Thankfully, our relationship got better. All the feelings and emotions that I had hidden, I did not know how to react, but it did get a little better, but things changed big time after the stroke. Two of the hardest things that's happened recently is on April the 7th, 2013, my dad had a sudden brain aneurysm from the medication he was taking to stop his stroke, and he passed away in the bedroom at my parents' house. I saw him at ICU all hooked up, and it was one of the hardest, longest weeks of my life. We took him off life support and moved him to hospice. And for the first time I saw someone die in front of me on April the 11th, and I went to my first sober memorial and my first sober funeral. I've had every feeling you can imagine, cried me in tears and tried not to drown the Russian River. I've even lost 65 pounds without trying. It's thrown off my sleeping habits and my eating habits and my life habits. His death has affected me in ways I never thought. I didn't think that I cared, but I did. And it's taken its toll. Strangely, well, thankfully my boss I had at the time was a big help. I called him from hospice, crying my eyes out, and we still keep in contact today to make sure I'm still kicking. And he called me to the office quite often to make sure I was having it together. I found myself crying at my desk. I think most people in the office understood, and they supported me and they helped me out. 20 years to the day from the Northridge earthquake, which was the other thing that tore my life apart. My job was phased out. I'd been there almost 7 years. My boss could have fired me, but he was compassionate enough to keep me so I could get my 4-month severance. Over the last 3 years, I've had to deal with 2 of my friends dying. One is my friend Roberta. Another was my friend Sean, who I knew for over 20 years. The loss of my job, uh, and my loss of my dream. I wanted to keep working, but my body's kept falling apart. And I'm now dealing with poor condition there's no cure for. And I probably have less than 10 years to live. As bad as I wanted to go back to work, my body's not letting me. But right now I've got needles attacking my right side of my head. It's from the severe spinal cord compression, which began last June. There's no cure for it. They want to do surgery, but it's not possible. I had 19 years and be 20 in August if I make it that far. The positive that's helping keep me going is my helping others online, because I rarely see anybody anymore in person. Realizing what it took for me to get clean and sober from being an out-of-control addict, alcoholic, on the street to actually working with technology now. And only God could pull it off, and none of that would be possible if I was still drinking. There's a negative side and a positive side to the last 19 years. I haven't had a sponsor for a while, not by choice. I have been looking, but this city's not been easy to break into, despite the fact I've been here 20 years. I rarely see or hear from anyone else, except on the internet. I've canceled holidays years ago. It's hard to celebrate when you're alone. However, I am working the steps and have been helping others on the internet. And I am sponsoring 3 people now if I never get a hold of them again. The advantage is I'm advancing in the system. I have more material goods than I could ever imagine or dreamed about. I'm being responsible. And if all this pain and suffering had been happening 20 years ago, I would have gotten the hell out of Phoenix and been on the run and done another geographic, but I'm not sure to where. And I read my recovery books every morning. I pray every morning. I've been learning meditation, which has kept me out of trouble more than once the last 2 years. And I'm working on numerous projects, and this is one of them. One of my problems was step 1 and 2 was we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and our lives to become unmanageable. I did not want to admit that I was powerless. And that took a very long time. And many of us have problems with a higher power or God, especially when I got burned so badly from Bible school and my being in the ministry. My walk with God's been a major roller coaster since 74. Right now we're okay. And I ask God to remove my defects of characters every day. And I try to carry the message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Again, it's a major miracle that I'm still alive and still somewhat sane. And I am not kidding you when I say the last 2 years have been the most painful time in my life, especially since I got sober. Having to deal with deaths and watching my dad die and the loss of a job and not being able to go back to work has taken a serious toll on me. But I have to remember how far I've come, and I don't want to let others down that have been trying to help on the internet and other places. In closing, I was told, I'll tell you what was told me. Chase your recovery as hard as you chase your addiction. And I've been out 4 o'clock in the morning finding out where the hell I can get the drugs at, and have hit every single bar you can imagine. A slip is sobriety losing its priority. If your recovery does not come on top and stay on top, you're more than likely to lose it. I was told to not be hungry, angry, or to. I was told to be not to be hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Where I'm barely eating anymore. I don't get angry that often, but I do get sorrowful. I'm lonely most of the time and on my own, and I'm constantly tired despite the fact that I'm going to sleep all night. Anyone can easily suffer a relapse, even with 19 years or 19 months, but no one's guaranteed that they'll make it back in recovery. The actual recovery rate is very low for addicts and alcoholics. I've lost several friends due to drugs and alcohol, and they end up dying every day. I have to work the program every day and keep it as a top priority. The end result is jails, institutions, and death. I've come close to jails and institutions and to death. Work the steps, work the program, and I am trying to find a sponsor again. Again, I don't get that meetings that often because I don't drive, and with my physical and emotional conditions I'm in, I'm doing good to just get outside. Keep coming back. The program does work if you work it. It won't if you don't. Even if you slip, don't stay down there in the mud puddle and play in the mud. Get up and try again, because many of us have relapsed and we got back up and we made it. Others have relapsed and are no longer here. Again, it's a miracle that I'm still alive and I'm still sober. And if I can make this 180-degree turnaround, it is possible for anybody. I was honestly told my first sponsor that just because when you get clean and sober, life's going to be beautiful and it's going to make sense. Well, that's not true. I've been through more pain than you can imagine, than I can describe to you. But crying beats having to break down or having to relapse. There's no guarantee I will stay sober or I can't stay sober, but I only do this one day at a time, and that's all I have is today. Again, if I can do this 180-degree turnaround, anything is possible. So keep coming back. Miracles still happen because you're looking at one. Anyway, take care. God bless. In closing, I have written out my story and it is available by email. And God is doing to me what I cannot do for myself, because with all the pain that I've been in and I am in, physically, mentally, and emotionally, He's the only one that is able to keep me sober. So, anyway, God bless. Take care.